the God of peace. Amen. Please be seated. Good morning.
Good morning.
What I am about to say to you this morning should not alarm you, rather that I seek for your prayer. Last Friday, my wife Heidi and I decided to visit Mrs. Estrella Lagunte at the Doctor's Medical Center in Modesto, California, a 3-hour drive from Daly City. Mrs. Lagunte was just discharged from the hospital a couple of weeks ago, but had to be brought back to the emergency room a week later due to pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that travels to the lung. She's doing fine now and is expected to go home next week. Mr. and Mrs. Lagunte, if you recall, with their sister Rebecca, are the ones who travel on Sundays from Modesto to Daly City just to join us in our Sunday services and fellowship hours. After our visit with Mrs. Lagunte that afternoon, Heidi and I traveled a 2-hour drive from Modesto to Vallejo, California to visit Mrs. Rosalia Basa, whom you know has a cancer and is being rehabilitated at the Windsor Vallejo Care Center for a week now. We were so amazed that we never had met the traffic at 4 p.m. on the Friday afternoon rush hour. Our GPS took us some back roads connecting to Highway 80 north to Vallejo. And we were just in time for her dinner hour. She didn't like the food being served, so we went to a nearby Chinese restaurant and bought her wonton noodle soup. Heidi helped her prepare the food and she started eating. We left Mrs. Basa at 7 p.m. and traveled back home. Once home, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the 6 hours road conversations I had with my wife. Remember those? When you travel a long road, you have to be awake, so you have a conversation and everything under the sun or under the moon. It was our road to Emmaus conversation, I thought. We talked about how we found this church in 1998 when we were looking for a church we can consider a home and family. We talk about a time when pews were mostly filled with faithful souls. We talk about those church pillars who have gone before us and how they shared their visions of a growing and vibrant church who is committed to protect, respect, and love all that come to our gatherings. And we talk about the youth and how we could minister to them and let them feel we care. We heard for the young people who think they have nothing to live for. We heard for the old people who are alone and sick. Our hearts go to families that are torn apart and broken. For the homeless and the unemployed. Then I revealed to her about my feeling of leadership decline towards the approach of my 10th year anniversary as Vicar of Holy Child in St. Martin. I said to her, it seems to me that this church needs a new leader with the new ideas that could grow our church membership and boost our stewardship. My wife reminded me that I have done so much for the church during those tenure and that she believes God continues to guide me with the help of the church leadership and the support of the membership. She also reminded me to think about all the volunteers who have generously given their time and talents to support the various programs of the church. And I thank her for the reminder of such wonderful love we all share in this God's vineyard. But I said to her as well that I feel that I'm going through my valleys after the peak experience of leadership. And that I wish to see more leadership responsibilities from the Bishop Committee and all the members where all things are done collaboratively and in harmony. I even said to her that maybe God is calling me for another task. She simply said, "Pray and have peace of mind. You will hear the voice of God talking to you." Then, as I was reading the Gospel in preparation to making my sermon today, I read the part prior to this Gospel today, and I realized that we just had our Road to Emmaus experience. What is this Road to Emmaus experience? The Gospel today tells us, or prior to the Gospel today tells us that two of his disciples were walking on the road to the road to Emmaus, and they were talking about how this Jesus Christ was put to death and the third day is alive. They didn't realize that while on the road they were talking with Jesus. And after they've eaten with him and Jesus left, they realized that it was Jesus. So they went back to Jerusalem and told the others. So the Gospel today tells us about the two disciples who met the risen on the way to Emmaus. They came back to Jerusalem to share their experience with the apostles. We read that while they were talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." I realized Christ makes himself present in the process of sharing their faith experience with the other unbelieving disciples who had doubts still that Jesus has risen from the dead. Now the 11 apostles and their companions are in turn enabled to experience the risen Lord, and it takes no stretch of the imagination to see that for the two who shared their experience, this would be a big strengthening of faith, a big empowerment. What does Jesus do to those who experience him? First, he communicates peace to their troubled hearts. Then he tries to convince them that the same Jesus of Nazareth who suffered and died the shameful death of the cross is the very one who is now alive in glory with God. He goes as far as eating boiled fish, which of course he does not eat in order to make the point. Then he opens their minds to understand the scriptures and how they point to him. Finally, he commissions them to be witnesses. You are witnesses of these things. This is what Jesus did when he appeared in the gathering of the disciples that Sunday morning 2,000 years ago. And this is what he does when he appears in a Sunday gathering, the faithful here today with us. And indeed, that's what happened on that night I was contemplating on the 6 hours conversation I had with my wife. Notice how active Jesus is. He is the one who gives them his peace. He is the one who strengthens their faith and takes away their doubts. He is the one who opens their minds and explains the scriptures to them. He is the one who declares them in his witness. The disciples did not do much in the encounter except to open their eyes to see him, to their hearts to let in his peace, their minds to receive his instructions. And in the end, when he says, "You are witnesses of these things," they would be expected to respond, "Yes, Lord," and then go out and try to be just that. How do we witness to Christ, if I may ask you? Here, many wayside preachers get it wrong. It is not by threatening people with eternal hellfire. It is not by arguing with them on controversial theological issues. It is simply as the two disciples on the way to Emmaus did, by telling the story of our personal encounter with Christ. It is sharing with them why we are Christians. It is by doing our part as witnesses of God's saving embrace. And it's that very reason why I'm sharing that experience like that last Friday. As I said in the beginning, it should not bother you or trouble you why I'm sharing this to you. Rather, we need each other's prayer for the years to come for us. The gospel today invites us to be a living witness to Jesus Christ. How can we witness to, or how can we be witness to the wonderful acts of God in Jesus Christ? You see, typical Episcopalians do not talk about biblical verses to others, but show more how to act and be a witness of God's love and grace by sharing their blessings to others. Many of us are Episcopalians out of habit rather than out of conviction. We come to Mass, we say our prayers, and we act in moral way, and nothing more than that. Yet the final words of Jesus in today's Gospel are intended for us just as much as they were intended for the disciples. You are witnesses of these things. We have to make the transition from being what we call passive Episcopalians to becoming active Episcopalians. We must move beyond habits and become witnesses. We might be slow learners, but there is not complication. What we must do is simply realize that God has chosen us for these particular tasks, to be His witnesses. And you might say, what do I know? How can I give witness? I know nothing. But you would be wrong. You know a great deal. You know about Jesus. You know the life story of Jesus. More importantly, you know that He died and rose again. And you know why He did this. To free us from our sins and open up for us the way of everlasting life. He did it out of love. And so, my dear friends, I ask you today, what is your personal encounter story with God? Would you share them? Would you be a witness of His saving embrace? Would you continue to be steward of your baptismal vows, to be to each other a steward, loving each other, loving our neighbors, ourselves, loving God, and the whole humanity and creation around us? We are all one. Will you share it? I pray for your